We finally found out whether the Boogeyman actually visited Patricia and why the islanders' biological age is in such a crazy contrast with how old they actually are. Episode 8 was absolutely fantastic, and it gave us some great clues that I'm so excited to break down with you. In one of my previous videos, I threw out a theory that the island slows down its residents' biological clocks just to keep them in their reproductive years longer. And honestly, it looks like episode 8 finally proved me right. I don't think it was just a coincidence that Patricia points out the sheriff's wife is over 40 when she finds out about the pregnancy. In a harsh environment like that, and with all the stress they're under, it really does feel like a total miracle. So I get that this whole idea, the contrast between aging on the outside while staying biologically young on the inside, might cause a bit of a brain freeze at first glance, especially if we look at it through the lens of our world. But if you ask me, we shouldn't overthink the tiny details too much. After all, we're watching a horror mystery show that plays by its own rules. It's pretty clear that the supreme entity hiding out in the underground tunnels couldn't care less about what our characters look like on the outside. It only cares about one thing, making sure that the contract signed with Richard Warren stays valid for as long as possible. And for that to happen, it's not enough just to keep the bloodline of the first settlement's leader going. There also needs to be enough people around who can actually keep reproducing and bringing new generations into the world. And from what we can see, this plan is still running without a single hitch. Richard Warren's descendant is still living somewhere out in Widow's Bay, and new faces keep showing up on the island. That's exactly why I'm guessing the upcoming episodes might focus heavily on hunting down whoever shares DNA with the island's first leader. I actually made a whole separate video on this topic, where I gathered all the clues pointing to who this mystery person might be. I highly recommend checking it out because there are some really juicy hints there. But in the meantime, let's keep moving. We finally got to see the actual Boogeyman we've been hearing about for so long. It's a bit of a bummer that we didn't really get any new details about who he actually is though. Then again, maybe that wasn't even the main point of the story. What mattered more here was something else. Showing Patricia's incredible transformation. She finally stood up for herself and showed her teeth, not just to this local antagonist, but also to Chris, who seems completely stuck in a teenage mindset. I mean, it's hard to call it mature behavior when someone lets old school grudges run their life and can't even show a little empathy during a literal crisis. Chris tried to justify her attitude by claiming Patricia just made up the whole Boogeyman story to get attention. Her biggest argument was that the police never logged any of the phone calls. Personally, I believe Patricia right from the start. Even though a few details definitely made me raise an eyebrow, it still felt obvious to me that she wasn't just spinning a yarn. She was talking about a very real nightmare she's been carrying deep inside for a very long time. I don't know if you guys caught this, but there was a super symbolic moment when Patricia interrupted Chris's friend group, and they were right in the middle of talking about the lovely bones. I'm guessing a lot of you have seen the movie adaptation directed by Peter Jackson. It's a deeply emotional story about a teenage girl who tries to reach out to her family from the beyond after she goes missing. My mom actually showed me that movie back in the day, and I still remember getting absolute goosebumps watching it. But Chris doesn't seem to learn a single thing from any of this. While the other women seemed like they wanted to believe Patricia, even if they were hesitating a bit, Chris just refuses to listen to her former classmate. On top of that, she just keeps throwing all kinds of accusations her way. I absolutely love that Patricia didn't let herself get baited by those cheap shots anymore. She was completely focused on a much bigger goal, and that's ultimately what allowed her to face her biggest childhood fear and finally put that chapter of her life to bed. The moment when she coldly took control of the situation to keep the Boogeyman from slipping away, all while Enya's beautiful track Caribbean Blue was playing in the background, was just brilliant. It managed to be funny and incredibly smart at the same time. Most characters in classic suspense movies totally lose their ability to think strategically in situations like that, which makes Patricia's practical approach feel even more refreshing and satisfying. While we could probably talk about Patricia all day, I think it's time to shift gears over to Tom's storyline. Because he took a massive step forward, he finally opened up to Evan about what actually happened to his mom. We all remember that for the longest time, the official story was that she passed away from complications after childbirth. Technically, Tom didn't lie, but he definitely left out a huge chunk of the truth. According to Tom, Lauren wouldn't have wanted Evan to remember her the way we've come to imagine her through those strange letters. And to be perfectly honest, I'll say it again, Despite all his flaws, Tom truly comes across as a dad who is doing his best out of pure love. It would be incredibly heavy for Evan to carry a truth like that around, especially if the whole world found out about what happened to Lauren. It could have triggered a massive backlash, pretty much like the one we saw with Patricia. Let's be real, not everyone knows how to handle complicated personal histories with care, especially teenagers who don't always realize how much weight their words and actions carry. At the same time, Tom purposely kept some cards close to his chest, genuinely believing that whatever was going down in Widow's Bay was finally over and done with. You can kind of see where he's coming from too. Evan is prone to impulsive reactions and has this total knack for finding trouble. In a way, it's just classic teenage wiring. But it's pretty obvious that whenever Evan does find out about the hidden details, things are going to get very dramatic. It's definitely not going to be an easy conversation, especially since the kid is already counting down the days until his trip to Boston to see the Red Sox play. Before we move on, I want to highlight one really important point. The island didn't take Lauren right away. It almost felt like it granted her a grace period just so she could bring Evan into the world. When you think about the way Tom described everything his wife went through, there's a certain pattern to it. So it's entirely possible that Lauren's departure was a kind of payment for a distortion of time that she never even consented to in the first place. So now we just have to hope the sheriff actually listens to the warnings before things completely spin out of control. Finally, I'd love to talk about that scene with Wick. He finally took a beautiful step toward making things right with Jerry. Just as a quick refresher, Wick has been carrying a mountain of guilt over the tragic loss of Jerry's brother, even though the whole situation was way more complicated than he thinks. I have a strong feeling Jerry herself never actually blamed Wick. If anything, you can tell from her vibe that she gets it was just a heartbreaking, unexpected accident. My heart honestly breaks for Wick, but at the same time, I'm so happy to see him taking that first step toward letting it go and freeing himself from that constant weight of regret. I also really appreciate that the showrunners didn't take the easy route of just throwing Wick back together with his ex. Instead, they gave us a much more grounded, realistic slice of life. Jerry is genuinely happy with another guy whom she clearly loves, and interestingly enough, he's actually totally cool with Wick. It adds so much maturity to the scene and makes it feel a lot closer to real life, where not every story gets a second chance at romance. So, what should we look forward to next? I have a feeling the upcoming episodes are finally going to start peeling back the layers on the main force behind everything happening on the island. We've piled up quite a few questions by now, and it feels like the show is finally gearing up for a moment of truth. I'm also anticipating some kind of betrayal from a few of the locals who clearly know a whole lot more than they're letting on. They might end up being the key to the next big breakthrough. Or on the flip side, they could throw everything into absolute chaos. I would also love to see more entities or characters from the island's folklore show up, and see how our main crew faces off against them. This could turn out to be one of the coolest directions for the story to go, since the island's mythology is probably where we'll get most of our answers anyway. It's pretty much a guarantee for the kind of action we all love to see. I think you will agree with me that episode 8 sets the stage perfectly right before the big finale. Our characters have finally started unpacking the emotional baggage that's kept them stuck in place and looping back to the past for years. Looking at the pacing of the plot and that massive storm rolling in, we're in for 2 incredibly intense episodes that will either wrap up the story beautifully or serve as a perfect bridge to a second season. All that's left for us to do is hold tight and wait for the next drop. What about you guys? Do you think we're getting a season 2 for this story? Drop your theories down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out, and I'll catch you in the next video.